Hi, this is Teddy, and you're listening to Marisa Kabas on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network. Bye!
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast family of podcasts, and I am joined today by yet another kick-ass broad. This is Marisa Kabas, who is a writer. Hi, Marisa.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. So, listeners, we're just going to sort of have a fun conversation today about the joy that has so far been 2020.
So much joy, boundless joy.
But Marisa, start us off by just sort of talking a little bit about yourself and your background in politics and the work you did with Crush the Midterms.
Sure. So I've had a career that's spanned a number of different fields and a number of different experiences that somehow all culminated in me ending up where I am right now. I worked as a number of years as a journalist, and I wrote about women's politics and reproductive health. And after the 2016 election, when all hell broke loose, I started veering in the more activist realm. I started a newsletter about protests that were coming up around the country. And from there, I started working at a company that did social impact work. And, while on the side, doing a lot of my own activism, canvassing for candidates, and doing other sort of community work, I helped found this platform called Crush the Midterms. So it was a digital platform that helped people get personalized plans for volunteering in the 2018 midterm elections. So you'd answer a few questions about yourself, where you live, how much money you could afford to donate each month, what sort of skills you could offer a campaign, and then it would create this really neat plan for you. So it was this really amazing way to engage with people in every corner of the country. We had people making plans in all 50 states, and it was so cool because they would share their stories, they would write into us, they would tweet at us, and it just helped me kind of feel so much more connected to our democracy at large, to care about campaigns and elections happening in places far away from where I live. And it really energized me towards 2020. And I can't believe it's actually the year 2020 right now. And there's so much about to happen. It's kind of blowing my mind.
I was just saying to my husband, I was like, 2020 is that date that seemed like impossibly far away when I was a kid. And I was like, where's my flying car? And then I realized flying cars would be terrible for the environment. So let's just stick with what we have.
It feels like we're in the future.
Yes, in a
and
just
yet so
dystopian.
Yeah, truly. It's like, have you seen Back to the Future 2?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, like where he kind of goes to the future and everything's gone completely wrong. Like it kind of feels like we're in that version and we have to go back at some point and fix something in the past. Maybe the 2000 election, for example.
Yes. One thing I was just recently talking with a guest about, and I wanted to sort of tease this out with you a little bit too. You were just saying about how you were able to talk to people all over the country and feel connected. And so there's this really positive side of social media, right? Not just social media, but, sort of the internet and being connected to other people. And you see this a lot with, people who are maybe like a blue dot in a red sea of where they live. And it would otherwise be hard to figure out that there were actually other Democrats, other progressives around them. But obviously there's a lot of negativity and troubling things about Twitter, for instance, Twitter, Facebook.
Really?
all of these sorts of media. How do you, when you're thinking about Twitter, for instance, and that's actually how we met. That's how we know each other, is through Twitter. So
yeah.
Obviously there's good things there. But, how do you sort of stay grounded, stay sane, pick through all the noise and figure out what's good and what's real? for people who are sort of scared of social media or spend some time there but worry about it, what are some things that you have learned or have thought about as you've thought about engaging on social media and with people all over the country?
Well, I think that people's impressions of social media are well-founded. It can be a really scary place. It can be really overwhelming. I have a lot of friends who will say, I don't do Twitter. I don't get it. And I've been using Twitter specifically for, it's been about 10 years now. I would say probably 8 years consistently, but I was forced to sign up for it my senior year of college in my digital media class. And I think that you just learn so many things sort of on the job, so to speak, even though no one is paying me to do this. And one of the things that I've realized is that if I'm getting bogged down in something really negative or really overwhelming, I just have to take a step back, and I'm not always good at it. And sometimes I find myself sort of spiraling into this social media vortex. And my boyfriend will be like, put the phone down, step away.
My husband says the same thing.
Let's go get some air. Let's go outside. And it's good to have people in your life acting as guardrails, but you also really have to do it for yourself. And I'm trying to get better about it. At the very beginning of the year, which was, I guess, last week, but feels like months ago already, I said to myself, I'm not going to get bogged down in dumb things. Like I'm just going to try really hard to pick my battles. Like I'm going to allow myself to feel upset and enraged about things that are worth being upset and enraged about. But, a crappy op-ed in the New York Times or like something that some random person that I don't really know anything about has tweeted, like I can't let that psychologically bog me down because we have so much work to do and we need to be firing on all cylinders. So that's one thing. And then I think another thing is just finding your people, finding the right people to follow and the right people to engage with. Some people will say that's a bubble, and I think that's true, but I think everyone has their bubbles. We create our own bubbles on social media or with the TV we consume, the podcasts, the movies we watch. So it's incumbent upon you to create a media environment for yourself that feels comfortable and non-threatening. I've made some really incredible friends through Twitter. I have a group chat of girls that we talk a lot about politics, but also just about life and different stuff. And most of us haven't even met before, but it's one of the most meaningful places, even though it's not a physical place, it's one of the most meaningful places in my life. And so I guess anytime I get a little bit defensive of people when people are degrading social media, because I just think of all the things I've learned about and all the people I've met that I never would have otherwise. I've become so much more sensitive to certain issues. A really prime example is issues affecting the disability community. I remember in the 2017 fight over Saving the Affordable Care Act, I started seeing people pop up from the disability community. And then I learned through activists on Twitter about the whole history of ADAPT and how disability activists have been at the forefront of so many different social justice movements in our history, and they just don't get the recognition they deserve. But at least I feel like I can personally say I am recognizing them, and I am so much more attuned to the needs of their community as a result of Twitter. So that's a very long-winded way of saying it's all what you make of it. And I think even, from your experience, you see like there's so much to be made of it.
Yeah, one tool that I have found extremely useful on Twitter is the list function. So I've made lists of like feminist tweeters that I want to read, and was very careful to make those lists be very inclusive. So I wasn't just getting like white women's voices, you know, and I was getting women of color and Black women and trans women and, you know, looking very carefully for diverse voices. And then once a day, I go and just look through that list instead of looking through my whole horrible timeline and just look at that list and say, what are these people saying? And I want to make sure that I'm listening to them every single day that they are talking. And so, yeah, I think there is a lot of real good that can be found on Twitter and on Facebook too. I know Facebook's sort of evil and all of those things, but there are real connections there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that my mom, for example, has become very politically involved in the last few years, as I have as well. And she's part of, she lives on Long Island in New York, where I grew up. And she's part of a Long Island political Facebook group. And, you know, there's some times where I'm like, okay, Mom, stop like engaging with random people on Facebook. Like, it's just like the rules of the road. But I know that she's learned so much and been able to connect a lot with people who are as passionate as she is about these issues in her area. So, you definitely can't say it's all bad.
So one thing, as people are using things like social media, but just in general, you know, the internet, what's some advice you have on messaging? So, you know, I know that people don't always think a lot about how to write a good tweet, for instance, or a good email for that matter. You know, how do we make sure that we are crafting our messages, even our sort of throwaway personal messages, in ways that really inspire people, motivate people to do the things that we're hoping that they do, and, you know, are just dealing with the kinds of things that we actually want to engage with, you know, as you were saying. I'm just not going to just worry about some of those things. Yeah. How do we take that to the messaging step then?
I think that there's a great responsibility that comes along with having a platform, whether you have a couple hundred followers and a couple thousand or many thousands. There are people seeing what you're saying, which is a big change from when people just chatted with each other in person and that was it. So when you're posting something on social media, especially when it has something to do with anything as important as our government, our elections, the law, specific people, public figures, you kind of have to think a few steps ahead before you tweet something. It's so easy to just have something pop in your brain and type it out and then click send. And we've all done it and regretted and lived to tell the tale. But I know that the tweets that have gotten me in the most trouble are probably the ones I've thought through the least. So it kind of goes back to taking it seriously as a medium. I know it's you don't want to ascribe scholarly thought to the art of Twitter.
Maybe we should.
Maybe. I don't know. It's like when the president of the United States is tweeting out his intentions to commit war crimes via this platform, maybe it's time that we actually do take it seriously. Like I said, I've been using it for years, and I still have friends or acquaintances or people I meet who kind of laugh at the idea that I take Twitter so seriously, but it's pretty serious. So, I mean, like our whole discourse as a nation is unfolding largely on this platform. So it's like, you're a part of that though. Like I have an account and you have an account just as much as Donald Trump has an account, and we're all part of this ecosystem. So it's thinking about, am I being a positive part of this ecosystem, or am I like thinking about it as an actual environment? Am I polluting the environment that we're in? And again, just like we all forget to recycle sometimes, we can be polluters on Twitter, on the internet, but really thinking about, are you making a positive contribution, and are you talking about things that you actually care about? Because I find that when I am tweeting about things I care about, those are the things that other people connect with the most. So you can tweet about whatever you want, but finding an area that feels authentic to you and that you feel like you have a little bit of knowledge in that area will also just help you create, I think, a more positive presence.
So you are Jewish, and there's been a lot of sort of anti-Semitic statements and rhetoric and attacks that have been going on. Can you talk some about sort of the environment of sort of American politics and discourse? I know that it's nothing new to Jewish people to be targeted, but what that sort of looks like and what those of us who are not Jewish can do to be better allies and make sure that we are really standing up for people who are being attacked by the president and other people.
Sure. So something that I always say, and I feel like only other Jews can understand, is being Jewish is very weird. And I say that because in some circles we're seen as other and a minority. And then in other ways we have a lot of privilege and are not as endangered as many other religious or ethnic minority groups. So kind of starting there, I think people outside the Jewish community probably are a little bit unsure about how to be good allies, because I think a lot of times we feel unsure about where we kind of stand in the midst of all the uptick in racism and discrimination that is going on in the country. That being said, as we've seen in the last just couple of weeks, there has been a sharp increase in anti-Semitic crimes, specifically against people who are visibly Orthodox. So, I guess I would call myself a Reform Jew, which is, about as close to secular as you can get. And these are people who wear specific clothing and are, walking down the street identifiably Jewish as people understand it. So I think there's a way to support people like that. And then there's ways to support the larger community. I think with anything, listening is just really important. So when a majority of Jews are saying X event makes us feel unsafe and discriminated against, just say, okay, yeah, we hear you and we are here to support you however we can. This past Sunday in New York, there was a big solidarity march, which was really amazing. I've seen estimates between 10,000 and 20,000 people showed up. And it was a lot of Jewish people, but also interfaith community allies. And New York especially is really wonderful like that because we all live very close together in very close quarters, and we ride the subway together, and there is a good amount of mutual respect between communities. So I think it's just seeing our common ground, but then also letting us have moments where we are at the center and letting us feel our trauma and our pain, and understanding that we have a really painful history that's not too far in the past. My grandfather, he's 92 years old, and he survived the Holocaust. And he and one sister survived, and the rest of his family were killed by the Nazis, murdered. And so that's really just 2 generations away from me. So I understand that, as a kind of a white person in America, as a middle class person in America, I have certain privileges, but it doesn't mean that I don't have incredible fears of going to a synagogue now or being at a place where it's a clearly Jewish event. So it's just listening to the groups that are affected by hate, and then just saying we are here and we won't tolerate that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, I think that we have so many, and I've been talking about this a lot on the podcast too, but there are so many issues to think about, so many things that are horrible right now, so much that people are thinking about. And I think a lot of people feel sort of don't know where to focus, don't know what to do. But I think that what you just said is so important, that just listening to people and what they are asking for, listening to communities that are vulnerable and what they are saying is or is not helpful to them is really important, and is a good way to sort of direct our energy as we're sort of flailing about, not sure what to do next because everything's terrible.
but also like don't try to reinvent the wheel. Like you don't have to start a whole new organization or a whole new task force or whatever. It's like just look to the sources that can give you good information. Look to people, in this case, in the Jewish community, and listen to what they need. And don't you don't need to be a hero. You don't need to come up with a grand scheme. It's just I can't tell you how important it is for me to see non-Jewish people talking about anti-Semitism, because it just validates that it's real and that our pain is real and that we're allowed to be openly upset and afraid. But I also feel that any community is only as strong as its strongest allies, and no community is an island. So when I see people isolating after these incidents, it makes me sad. I don't blame them. I totally understand how people will kind of want to turn inward and just sort of isolate within their community because that's the only people they feel they can trust. But when people outside show that they actually are trustworthy allies, that actually makes us so much more safe than turning inward.
Yeah, definitely. So it's 2020. We very, very soon here will have the start of actual voting for a nominee for the Democratic primary. How do we make sure that we are doing the best job we can, analyzing candidates? Probably by this point, a lot of people know who they're going to vote for already, but, keeping track of what's happening, talking about what's happening in productive ways. And then, once we get to whenever the convention is, July or whatever that is, making sure that that we are rallying around behind the nominee, but also pushing the nominee to be the best that they can be. I think this is going to be a tricky election. There's already lots of hurt feelings from people whose candidates have had to drop out, and so what do you see as sort of the way forward over the next 9 or 10 months here to make sure that ultimately we defeat Donald Trump, but that of course can't be our only focus?
Absolutely. So I see a lot of people talking about the election from a place of fear. And I just think anytime you act out of fear, the result is probably not going to be long-term the one that sits best with you. So I see a lot of people saying, I'm going to support X candidate because I feel like it's the safest bet, like you said, to defeat Donald Trump, or because I think they would, for whatever reason, be able to handle an international crisis better than this other candidate. But when pressed, a lot of those people will say, oh, but I really love this other candidate. And that's the luxury of a primary. It's to pick the person that you feel passionate about and that actually speaks to your interests. And don't feel selfish voting for someone who you feel best represents you. If you see someone who inspires you, chances are they inspire a lot of other people. And so don't be afraid to proudly support someone, no matter which candidate it is, Democratic candidate, and to just be kind of resolute in your support. You don't have to apologize for it. I would say the only bad reason to support a candidate is fear. And I also think that fear sows more fear. So if you say to someone in casual conversation, well, I'm supporting, for example, Joe Biden because he's the only one who can defeat Trump and I think he's the most electable, then they're going to internalize that. But if you say, I'm going to support not speaking personally at all, but Elizabeth Warren.
No, not personal.
Because I think she has a forward-thinking vision for this country, and I believe she actually has all Americans' best interests at heart, that they're also going to internalize that and think, what if I actually looked at this election through the perspective of who is going to make this country a better place and not just a Band-Aid on the gaping wound that Trump has created.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I whoever it is in the Democratic group of candidates that people support, I'm okay with that. We're not all going to agree on the best way forward, but yeah, I like this idea of focusing on what's the best way forward. Not, how do we prevent the worst, but who do we actually want to see? Which vision for America are we really trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think things have gotten so real and so grim that people feel like they need to be sort of cynical realists. And I think that will somehow make them feel better if Trump gets reelected. And I think, honestly, the opposite. Like, think forward to November 2020 and say Trump beats this milquetoast candidate that we choose because we think that they were somehow going to be his best opponent. How will you feel knowing that you pushed your dreams and hopes for the future aside in service of some sort of, imagined idea of what we really need to do, what our duty is right now? No, you have the right to vote and you can vote for whoever you want. So why not make it someone that you actually believe in?
I love that. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to make sure that we talk about today?
I would just say that, again, if anyone out there listening has a candidate that they feel really passionate about, the primaries are upon us and they're not going to win themselves. So phone banking and canvassing and texting. Text banking is like the easiest thing in the world. You could do it from the comfort of your own couch. Just get involved however you can, because you can't be upset about an outcome that you didn't try to have an impact on in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a year that nobody has the luxury of just sitting on the sidelines. We all have to be involved. And so I'm sure that I'm happy to help people figure out how to get involved. I'm sure that Marisa is as well. So let us know if you don't know what to do and we'll hook you up.
Yes, please. I love talking about this stuff. Talk about it forever.
All right. Well, unfortunately, the podcast can't go forever. I wish it could. So we will wrap up there. But Marisa, thank you so much for talking to me today. I'm glad we made this work. And I'm sure before 2020 is out, we will find more times to chat about what's happening. We didn't even talk about, the looming apocalypse that's happening with war and climate change. So
they'll still be there another day.
So let's focus on the good parts of 2020 as they are so far. And
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at twobroadstalk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.